you put a plan and strategy in place to help improve things, and that's what you focus on, things that are measurable and consistent and regular, and then it compounds. We hear the saying all the time, you should make your bed every morning. It doesn't do anything for anyone other than you, but it's a very simple task that you get to tick off first thing in the morning, and then that sets the momentum for the next task and the next task, and you become more able to take on more challenging tasks. So those little things that we tick off and we complete are extremely important because they allow us to deal with the harder things and the bigger challenges.
Welcome back to the Unbound podcast. This episode is all about covering our 6-week challenge and some of the best practices that some of our most successful members used to gain the edge when it came to their nutrition. Today, we're going to talk about the outcomes of our 6-week lifestyle challenge, specifically around nutrition and consistency with people like training and showing up to the gym regularly and being more consistent and more, intentful with their diet. We're going to talk about, the 3 kind of best practices that our winners and the people who achieved their results, their goals, implemented into their lifestyle. I would say that for the majority of people doing the challenge, they all achieved some form of success. You and me both, Michael, as we were partaking in the challenge as well.
Yeah, a little bit externally, we didn't post as much. We didn't want to take anything away from anyone else that was in the challenge. One thing I can say though, we have run a fair few of these challenges. We do really try and preach that people work towards consistency and longevity and being able to sustain their habits. This is definitely the best in terms of consistent results for everybody. And we didn't necessarily do anything specifically that different. So we'll go through the process of reflection and try and have a look at things that we can obviously do better, which we do with all our challenges. But one thing that we definitely noticed is across the board, everyone was very consistent this time. Normally you see about a 30 to 40% drop off.
Yeah, it's very normal in anything, especially after the first 2 to 3 weeks. First week, you get like that hype up. You're like, woo, new challenge, ready to go. Like, gonna nail my nutrition, gonna show up to the gym every day. Then a couple of work stresses come in, bit of family life, things you weren't predicting were happening. And for some people, that's enough to derail them. For others, it's just part of the challenge. They'll keep going. And then as it gets later and later in the challenge, like I said, most people start to die off in that consistency, and then they obviously don't get the results they want. But then others who are able to maintain and see that progression along the way, we have that mid-challenge weigh-in. Some of the people might see a couple of kilos lost, a few percentage down, a bit of muscle on, and they might get a little bit more motivated. If anything, it's the process that motivates people, isn't the goal. People are like, yeah, I want to lose 5-10% body fat, or a couple of kilos, or I want to feel better, healthier, etc. But once they actually start feeling better, they start seeing those results physically in person, and they've got that visual representation, or even that little analytic that will tell them exactly what they've lost. They're way more motivated.
Yeah, and definitely, like I sat down with everyone one-on-one before we started, and we had a good chat, and everyone this time seemed very process orientated rather than goal orientated. And I feel like that was a big part of it. They were really going to double down on all the little things that they did, and they didn't really care about the results at the end of the day. They just wanted to make sure they were changing certain behaviors, and then the results took care of themselves.
Explain more about what a process-orientated approach entails.
So instead of being fixated on the end result, you become a little bit more aware of the day-to-day. So a habit side of things might be like, okay, I'm not going to be on my phone after 7 o'clock at night. Making sure that you're working on your sleep, and that becomes a process. You're planning, you put a plan and strategy in place to help improve things, and that's what you focus on, things that are measurable and consistent and regular, and then it compounds. We hear the saying all the time, you should make your bed every morning. It doesn't do anything for anyone other than you, but it's a very simple task that you get to tick off first thing in the morning, and then that sets the momentum for the next task and the next task, and you become more able to take on more challenging tasks. So those little things that we tick off and we complete are extremely important because they allow us to deal with the harder things and the bigger challenges.
Yeah, I guess from that perspective too, it's like, at worst case scenario, because you're not going to have a perfect day every day, if everything goes to shit, like you get stuck in traffic, your boss yells at you, you might, forget your lunch.
You get sick. 6 weeks is a long time. A lot of the time, 70-80% of people are going to get sick at some point.
Exactly. It might feel like all your results are going down the drain, but at the end of the day, you've made your bed. So it's like, maybe I can't control this one particular part of the challenge, but what I can do is control these variables, like eating healthier while I'm sick, or just, going for a walk rather than worrying about going to the gym and working out, or focusing on getting a few extra minutes, even an hour of extra sleep at night. And that's going to compound over the long period.
Yeah, what can you do? So worry about what you can do, not what you can't do.
Exactly. And I heard this really cool thing is if the best 30-second advice that I've ever heard is pretty much like if you had all the problems that you're currently dealing with, you wrote them down, crossed out the ones you can't control, focused the ones you can, you'd be a lot better off. There'd be a lot less overwhelming stuff in your life if you just looked at what you can control and then try to fix that.
Yeah, you'd be less foggy and way more focused.
100%. Last thing from both of us here, Michael, I'm going to start with you. What was one of the biggest takeaways that you personally got from the challenge on your own goals, whether it was nutrition, sleep, training, that you've been able to maximize and you've carried over post-challenge?
Yeah, so for me, I've been in fitness for a very, very long time. And even doing the challenge, it made me realize that you're never too good to do the basics. Going back to the fundamentals, for me, competition is a big driver. So setting a challenge with yourself and I was one of the best things I could have ever done for accountability. And the Open kind of did that for me. It made me realize what my drivers were. And then I just used that again for the challenge. So I was like, all right, I'm going to double down on this. I'm going to try and work on things that I already thought I did pretty well. But then when I went through that process of reflection and really analyzing everything and making small changes, I realized I could just do that better.
Yeah.
And it was only little changes for me, but it was enough to compound and give me results that I hadn't achieved before. So for me, to give you an example, I've never been under 13% body fat. And no matter how much I've tried, I just couldn't get below that. As when now I'm sitting at like 11.4.
Yeah, and pretty crazy for where you started too. I guess almost the same for me. It's pretty much on the same lines. It's more like I was already doing all the right things, but maybe I wasn't as dialed in. Maybe I wasn't really making sure that like I'm tracking everything that I'm actually consuming. I'm being a little bit more broad where I'm now really dialing in and being detailed. And that doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone is as autistic as I am, where the numbers count and you get so dialed in and focused on one thing. But I know that my biggest pro is consistency. I'm able to be relentlessly consistent no matter what I do. As soon as I get a task, I just focus, go all in. So for me, it was more of just branching out with eating more vegetables, having more fruits, and taking away any form of added or packaged foods or processed stuff. Like, yeah, there's still like lightly processed things that are tucked in there, like bread, bagels, that kind of thing. But that stuff's not going to kill you. And I'm always, in my defense, I'm always kind of like, what would you eat breakfast with if you took away something like a bread or bagel when you combine it with something like an egg? It's like, yeah, you can have eggs on themselves, but if you're looking at adding carbs, having oats on the side really isn't as appetizing as having a slice of toast and then putting your eggs on it, adding avocado and stuff. It compounds the other things you can add onto it. Whereas if you're having the oats and the eggs separately, you're missing out on some of the vital vegetables that you can actually add into your meal. So that's the biggest thing that I found in the challenge for me was, being creative with my cooking, and it gave me the ability as well to, add more of those fruits and vegetables I normally wouldn't eat.
Yeah, and we got to bounce off each other a lot. It's a big advantage we had. We could just pick each other's brains. But I definitely found that doing it with everyone else, so we could have just done it by ourselves, but going back to the basics and just jumping in with the group, that group mentality really helped as well. Just having that common ground with other people, and I personally think it helped them too. Seeing us do it with them and just be normal.
Yeah, exactly. And made it feel like that even though we were implementing these particular rules and systems and mindset way of life with them, it's also like we're also leading by example, which I find very important. If you're telling someone you need to eat healthy but going out and drinking on the weekend, it's not really setting a good example for them, because they're just like, well, he can get away with it whereas I can't, and then they just feel down about themselves. But from your perspective, Michael, just last thing is just your result. Where did you start at the start of the challenge and where did you end up?
So I started around about 14% body fat, and then I ended up, weigh in, I was around 12, And then the week after the challenge, I've continued with it, and then I'm down to 11.4 at the moment. And I'm probably my goal is going to stay around that 11, and then start to focus a little bit more around performance.
Awesome. For me, it was more specifically around powerlifting. I'm looking at competing at the 81 kilo division. I believe I started the challenge at around about 83, 84, and I was 16.5% body fat. And I ended up at the end of the challenge at 14.7, which, like this week when I weighed in again, still following all the same practices and the lifestyle habits, I've weighed in at 13.6%, which is the lowest I've ever been. I've never been under 14, even at my peak physical condition. I was never under 14. So quite amazing that I got under there with, to be honest, a lot less training and a lot less effort when it came to like the physical side of it. But that's going to wrap up our challenge, 6-week challenge, for our lifestyle challenge.
Thanks for listening to the Unbound Unplugged podcast. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you have any suggestions for any future episodes, leave it in the comments down below, and check us out on Instagram at Unbound Athletic.